There's a lot of hype right now about using creatine to help with cognitive performance. But does it help with ADHD? I used engineering principles of testing, fail fast, we talked about it in a previous video, and I tested it on myself for about 2 months to see what would happen. So, does it actually help with ADHD? Well, yeah, sort of. Creatine's been used in the world of sports performance since about the 1990s. In fact, it's so commonly used that about 70% of college athletes say that they use it or have used it. Recently, there have been a few studies that have been done looking at the cognitive benefits of creatine. This is why everyone's excited and talking about it. What they did was they took a small group of people and they sleep deprived them for about 21 hours. That showed the effects of executive function loss. Then they gave them high doses of creatine, and it took care of that executive function impairment that was a result of the sleep deprivation. The study saw improvements in the participants in terms of working memory, focus, and mental fatigue. There's a bit of evidence too that creatine really only helps when people are under mental stress. We currently don't have any studies on creatine and ADHD, but people are really excited about this because of the executive function improvements that we saw in that other study. People are making lots of wild claims on the internet about how creatine is going to save everyone with ADHD. What we need more data. Actually, we have lots of data on creatine, just the data that we have is sports performance data, not cognitive research data. So is creatine safe? Yes, we make about 1 gram of creatine a day, but our body needs 2 grams. So what we don't make, we get through dietary sources. The trick is that the more creatine we ingest, our body's smart about it and says, I don't have to make creatine. The other flip side to that too is, as we get older, we do not decrease in creatine production. So that's a good thing. Creatine is found in muscles and brains. And since we usually don't eat brains in the US, we get it from eating meat. Now, when we cook meat, about 20% of the creatine gets destroyed. So in order to get the supplementation levels that we're after for physical and cognitive performance, we end up having to eat about 8.5 steaks a day, which seems like kind of a lot. So what happens if we don't eat meat? Well, the blood levels of creatine go down, but the levels of creatine in the brain stay the same. Why? Because the brain makes its own creatine. So what about our vegan and vegetarian brothers and sisters? Do they suffer any physical or cognitive performance declines? The answer is no. It turns out that there's some evidence that vegans and vegetarians, when they don't get creatine through diet, they become more efficient with creatine usage in the body. Remember, the brain levels stay the same. So maybe that leads to vegans and vegetarians being more creatine sensitive. We don't know. There's a lot more studies that have to be done on that to figure it out. So what happened when I started taking creatine for 2 months? Well, it took about 3 weeks for it to take effect. That's pretty normal, so that's a good thing. I noticed that task initiation, it helped a ton. It was almost like I was on ADHD stimulant medication. For things like working memory and impulse control, it maybe helped a little, but it wasn't really noticeable. And then when we get to like emotional regulation, it did not help at all. I had several bouts of depression. I got angrier, way easier. It was a real problem. And then there's the weight gain. That's a common side effect too, but I gained about 9 pounds. Maybe that was water weight, but after I stopped taking it, it kind of stayed. So maybe it wasn't all water weight. I noticed another side effect too. So I like to run. When I started creatine, I was running about 13 miles on a nice long Saturday run. During the course of the 2 months, my shins and my calves started to cramp more and more and more as I would run. So I talked to some friends of mine and I did a bunch of research, and they said, well, it could be that you're dehydrated. And creatine likes to suck water into the muscles. That's a good thing because muscles are 60 to 70% water. So you're putting the water where it needs to be in order to have high-performing muscles. So I tried hydration. It helped a little bit at first, but then not so much. Doing more research, I tried sodium and magnesium supplementation. None of it helped. Anyway, by the end of the 2 months, I was down to about a quarter of a mile before I had to walk because of so much cramping in my shins and my calves. When I stopped taking creatine, it took about 2 weeks, and then I was back up to running close to 5 miles again. In the interest of full disclosure, I have been whole food plant-based on and off for probably the last 13 years. And so maybe I have developed some creatine sensitivity. I don't know. There aren't any studies on this. Again, we need more data. So what should you do if you want to give creatine a try? Well, the first thing is make sure you're buying from a good source. The US doesn't regulate supplements, and you want to actually get what you pay for. So I'll put a link in the description with the creatine that I purchased for this 2-month experiment. Then you want to make sure that you're getting the right kind of creatine. So creatine monohydrate. It's just as effective as the other forms of creatine. They're usually more expensive. This is much cheaper. Like I said, it works just as well. Then you want to make sure that you're using creatine in the right times. So start with 5 grams of creatine in the morning. You can do it after you exercise and take it with food. That tends to help. But you want to make sure that your stomach is going to tolerate creatine. When you've done that for a little bit and you know that you're okay, then you want to move into taking a second dose of creatine, usually around lunchtime. So 5 grams in the morning with breakfast, 5 grams at lunch. So you're doing 10 grams total. There is a protocol that uses a loading phase for creatine where you take 20 grams of creatine like from the beginning, and that's supposed to get rid of that 3-week waiting period for creatine to take effect. It really doesn't, and you're just burning through creatine and it's not really helping all that much. So just skip that, just wait the 3 weeks and take 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, 10 grams total. So was your creatine experience like mine? Let me know how it goes in the comments. I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one where we engineer the crap out of ADHD.